Welcome to Whispers of Antiquity, where the past breathes through every whisper and ancient tales find new life. Today we journey into the heart of Greece, to the sacred sanctuary, where mortals and gods once met, the Oracle of Delphi. The morning sun rose over the rolling hills of ancient Greece, bathing the land in warm golden light. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wild thyme and laurel, whispering secrets of the past. Along a winding mountain path, a young woman named Callista walked steadily, her sandals worn from the long road. Each step she took was a heartbeat closer to Delphi, the city that shimmered like a mirage in her dreams. Callista's cloak was faded from the sun, and her hair was bound in a simple braid, but her eyes were bright with determination. She had heard the tales of the Oracle of Delphi since she was a child. Whispers spoke of a place where the gods still walked the earth, where Apollo himself spoke through mortal lips, and where mortals could glimpse their fate within the curling smoke of sacred incense. The journey had been long and weary. She had crossed dusty plains and rocky hills, fording rivers that ran cold and swift. Along the way, she met travelers who shared stories of the oracle's power, how kings sought her counsel before going to war, how poets dreamed of verses shaped by the god's breath. Some said the oracle's words were like riddles, twisting paths that could lead a man to glory or ruin. Callista had not come for glory or for war. She had come seeking the truth, a single thread, to weave through the tapestry of her life. Her heart carried questions like treasures. Who was she meant to become? What purpose waited for her in this vast and beautiful world? As the path climbed higher, the land grew wilder. Groves of olive trees gave way to rocky cliffs, and groves of laurel, their leaves shimmering silver in the morning light. Birds sang from hidden branches, their voices a chorus to the dawn. Callista paused to drink from a cool spring, its waters as clear as glass. She felt the weight of her journey settle on her shoulders like a cloak, but also a lightness, a sense that each step was guided by something greater than herself. At last, as the sun rose to its zenith, she reached the crest of the hill. Before her lay Delphi, cradled in the arms of Mount Parnassus. White marble gleamed in the sunlight, and the smoke of incense curled into the sky like a prayer. The temple of Apollo stood proud and serene, surrounded by columns that reached for the heavens. Even from a distance, Callista could feel the pulse of the divine, a heartbeat that echoed through the stones. She descended the slope, slowly taking in the city's quiet grandeur. Pilgrims and traders crowded the pathways, their voices low with reverence. Statues of ancient heroes lined the way, silent witnesses to the hopes and fears of those who came to seek the oracle's words. Callista passed them with a respectful bow, feeling the weight of centuries pressing close. At the entrance to the city, a priest in white robes stood to greet the pilgrims. His eyes were kind, but shrewd, and he held a staff carved with symbols of the sun. "Welcome to Delphi," he said, in a voice that carried the hush of mountains. "The oracle awaits those who seek, but remember the answers she gives are not always what you expect." Callista nodded, her heart fluttering like a bird. She knew that the oracle's words could change a life forever, or send it spiraling into darkness. But the fire of curiosity burned bright within her, and she would not turn back now. She joined the line of seekers, her steps echoing on the marble stones. As she waited, she watched the temple's columns gleam under the noonday sun. She wondered what secrets lay within, what voices spoke in the shadows. She wondered if the gods truly listened, or if the oracle's words were born from something deeper still, a mystery older than even the stones of Delphi. Callista stepped through the gates of Delphi, her breath catching at the sight before her. The city unfolded like a painting brought to life. Marble temples bathed in sunlight. Statues of gods and heroes standing silent in the morning glow, and priests and pilgrims weaving through the streets in a quiet dance of devotion. The air was alive with incense and the low murmur of prayers. Laurel trees lined the pathways, their leaves shimmering like silver shields, and olive branches crowned the doorways of homes and shrines alike. Everywhere she looked, she saw offerings to the gods, bowls of honey and fruit garlands of flowers, and small bronze figures left in reverence. Callista paused by the Athenian treasury, a gleaming building of white marble, adorned with scenes of myth and legend. Warriors in bronze relief clashed in silent battles, their spears forever poised. She traced the edge of one figure's shield with her fingertips, feeling the cold stone beneath her skin. These were stories she had known since childhood, tales of gods and mortals, intertwined in glory and tragedy. As she wandered deeper into the city, she passed through the marketplace where merchants called out their wares. Trinkets of bronze and clay, amulets carved with symbols of protection, and small vials of fragrant oil were spread out in dazzling array. The people of Delphi moved with purpose, their faces serene beneath the weight of the sacred. At the heart of Delphi rose the great temple of Apollo, its columns reaching for the sky. The steps leading to the temple were worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and as Callista climbed them, she felt a sense of stepping into the flow of something eternal. Here, it seemed, time itself was a guest, the past and present, woven into one. She stopped before the temple's entrance, where a group of priests in white linen stood. Their faces were calm, but their eyes shone with a light that seemed to come from within. They welcomed her with a nod, and she felt the weight of their gaze, as if they could see beyond her skin and into the secret corners of her heart. "Welcome, seeker," one of them said, his voice gentle but firm. "The oracle speaks to those who come in faith. What is it that you seek?" Callista hesitated, the words caught in her throat. "I seek to know my place," she said at last, her voice soft but certain. "I wish to understand the path that lies before me." The priest inclined his head. "Then you are welcome here. But remember, the oracle's words are not always plain. They are like the river that winds through the mountains, clear in some places, hidden in others. Listen with your heart, as well as your ears." She nodded, though her heart beat faster at the thought. All her life, she had heard of the oracle's riddles, the way her voice could shape a man's fate with a single breath. Some said the oracle's power came from the god Apollo himself. Others whispered that it was something older, something that had always lived in the earth and stones. The priest led her through the temple's grand doorway, and the scent of burning laurel filled her senses. Inside, the air was cool and hushed. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting golden beams that danced across the marble floor. Statues of Apollo lined the walls, their eyes forever fixed on the horizon. Callista felt small and awed beneath their gaze, but also strangely calm. She knew she had come to the right place, As she waited for her audience with the oracle, she watched the other seekers who knelt in prayer. A mother with a babe in her arms, her lips moving in silent supplication. A grizzled warrior with scars upon his face, his head bowed in respect. A poet who traced verses in the air with his fingers, his eyes lost in distant dreams. Each carried their own hopes, their own burdens. And in that shared space, Callista felt the quiet bond of those who seek a bond that stretched back through the centuries to the first, who had knelt in this place and whispered their fears to the stone. A hush fell over the chamber as a priestess emerged from the shadows. She wore a robe of white linen, and her hair was bound with a crown of laurel leaves. Her face was serene, her eyes deep and knowing. She was not the oracle, but a servant of the temple. Her presence, a reminder that the divine was always near. "Prepare your heart," she said softly, her voice like the sigh of the wind through the olive groves. "The oracle will speak soon." Callista nodded, her breath steady. She closed her eyes and let the quiet fill her, the weight of centuries settling around her like a cloak. She thought of the path that had brought her here, the long road, the stories she had carried in her heart. And she wondered what new story would begin here, in the heart of Delphi. Callista stepped deeper into the temple, the scent of burning laurel leaves wrapping around her like a silken shroud. The air was cool and heavy, each breath a reminder that she was treading sacred ground. Stone columns rose around her, their fluted surfaces glinting in the muted light. Soft voices murmured prayers in the shadows, and the rhythmic footfalls of the priests echoed like a heartbeat within the marble walls. A hush had settled over the temple, thick and expectant. It was as if the very stones held their breath, waiting for the moment when the veil between mortal and divine would thin. At the center of the temple stood the omphalos, the navel of the world, or so the ancients believed. A smooth, egg-shaped stone, veined with silver, it was said to mark the spot where Zeus's two eagles had met, confirming Delphi as the heart of the earth. Callista approached it with reverence, laying her fingers on the cool stone. She could feel a faint vibration beneath her fingertips, as if the earth itself was whispering secrets only the oracle could hear. A priest in a white robe approached her, his expression solemn. He carried a small bowl of water, fragrant with crushed laurel. "Wash your hands and face," he said, his voice a soft command. "Purity of body prepares the heart for the oracle's words." Callista dipped her hands into the water, feeling its chill bite her skin. She washed her face, the cool droplets running down her cheeks and into the hollow of her throat. As she did, she felt the dust of her long journey wash away, leaving her skin clean and her spirit open. The priest led her to a stone bench, where she sat in silence, watching the flickering light of oil lamps that lined the walls. Their flames danced and swayed, casting long shadows across the statues of Apollo. In the flickering glow, the god's face seemed almost alive. His marble lips curved in an enigmatic smile, his eyes alight with an immortal fire. From somewhere deeper in the temple, the sound of chanting rose soft and melodic. The voices of the priests and priestesses wove together in a tapestry of ancient syllables, a prayer that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. Callista closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her, her heart beating in time with the music. A gentle hand touched at her shoulder, and she looked up to see the same priestess who had greeted her before. Her face was calm, her eyes deep and knowing. "It is time," she said softly. "The oracle will speak." Callista rose, her legs trembling beneath her. She followed the priestess through a narrow doorway into a smaller chamber, the Aditon, the holiest part of the temple. Here the air was thick with incense, and the scent of laurel was stronger, mingling with the faint tang of earth and stone. At the center of the chamber sat the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi. She wore a simple white robe, her hair crowned with laurel. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted as she inhaled the sacred vapors rising from a deep fissure in the earth. Her eyes were half closed, the pupils drifting in a trance that reached beyond the mortal realm. The priestess gestured for Callista to kneel. She did so, her heart pounding in her chest, every breath a prayer. For a long moment there was only silence. The Pythia's breathing slowed, and the chamber seemed to hold its breath along with her. Then, in a voice that was both soft and strong, she spoke not to Callista alone, but to the world that waited beyond the veil. "Child of Earth," she murmured, her voice echoing like the wind through the olive groves. "You stand at the threshold of your destiny. The path is veiled in shadow, but your heart is the flame that will guide you." Callista felt a shiver run down her spine. She wanted to speak, to ask the questions that burned within her, but the priestess beside her laid a gentle finger to her lips. "Listen," she whispered. "The oracle speaks only in her own time." So Callista listened, her breath, still her heart open. The Pythia's words were like a river, winding and elusive, but beneath them ran a current of truth that she could almost grasp. And as the last echoes of the oracle's voice faded into the incense-thickened air, Callista knew that this was only the beginning. As the last of the oracle's words faded into the incense-laden air, Callista remained kneeling, her mind awash with questions she had not yet dared to speak. The Pythia sat in stillness, her breath steady, her eyes half-lidded, as if she hovered between worlds. But the hush was soon broken by the arrival of another, a warrior whose presence seemed to darken the doorway. He stepped into the Aditon, his armor glinting dully in the lamplight. Bronze and leather hugged his broad shoulders, and a red cloak hung from his back, the color of spilled wine. Callista watched as he approached the oracle, each step heavy with purpose. His face was weathered by the sun, his brow furrowed by years of battle. A jagged scar cut across his cheek, and his dark eyes burned with an intensity that made her own heart quicken. He knelt beside her, the weight of his armor echoing softly on the marble floor. In the flickering light, he seemed both fierce and vulnerable, a man who had seen the edge of the world and returned, but whose soul still carried the weight of unanswered questions. The priestess who stood beside the Pythia gave a small nod, her eyes meeting the warrior's. "Speak, seeker," she said, her voice a calm ripple in the silence. The oracle listens. The warrior drew a breath, his jaw tightening. "Great Pythia," he said, his voice low and measured. "I stand at the brink of war. My men wait for my command, and the fate of my city hangs in the balance. Tell me, will I return in triumph, or will I be swallowed by the darkness of Hades?" Callista shivered at the gravity of his question. In his voice she heard not only the fear of death, but the weight of countless lives that depended on his choice. She sensed, too, the shadow of pride, the hope that the gods would crown him with glory, even as they demanded the price. The Pythia's head tilted slightly, and she inhaled deeply of the sacred vapors that rose from the earth. For a moment, the chamber seemed to darken, as if the sun itself had turned its face away. Then, in a voice that was both gentle and terrible, she spoke, "Victory." She murmured her words soft as the sigh of the laurel trees. "Victory shall be yours, forged in the fires of battle. But beware, for pride is a shadow that follows the brightest light. In your triumph, remember that the heart that forgets humility shall be its own undoing." The warrior bowed his head, his dark hair falling across his brow. His shoulders seemed to tighten, as if her words had added a weight to the armor he wore. He did not speak, but Callista could see the storm of thoughts that raged within him, the hope of victory tangled with the warning of ruin. He rose slowly, his gaze lingering on the oracle. "I thank you, Pythia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "May Apollo's light guide me on the road ahead." As he turned to leave, his eyes met Callista's for the briefest of moments. In them, she saw a reflection of her own uncertainty, the knowledge that the oracle's words were a riddle, and that the true answer lay within the choices one made. He stepped back into the shadows, the red of his cloak vanishing like the last gleam of sunset. Callista watched him go, her mind swirling with the echo of his question. She wondered what battles lay ahead for him, and what battles waited within her own heart. The priestess turned her gaze to Callista, her expression soft but unyielding. "The oracle speaks in riddles," she said, as if she had read the confusion in Callista's mind. "Her words are not the end, but the beginning. In them lies the choice each soul must make." Callista nodded slowly. She understood now that the oracle did not shape destiny. She merely shone a light on the paths that lay hidden in the shadows. As the warrior's footsteps faded into the hush of the temple, Callista felt a tremor in her chest. The oracle's words still echoed in her mind. "Victory, but beware." She wondered if every seeker who knelt here carried away such riddles, a burden that was both a promise and a warning. The priestess's soft voice drew her back to the present. "It is your turn, child," she said, her eyes gentle but unwavering. "Step forward and let your heart speak." Callista's hands trembled as she rose from her place. She could feel the smooth marble beneath her fingertips cold and ancient as she took a step closer to the Pythia. The oracle sat serenely, her head wreathed in laurel, the sacred fumes of the earth coiling around her like mist. Her half-closed eyes seemed to see beyond this world to the quiet heart of fate. Callista knelt before her, the silence of the chamber pressing close around her. She took a breath, steadying the storm of questions within her. "Great Pythia," she began, her voice low and clear, "I have come not to ask of war or glory. I seek only to know my purpose. The road before me is dark, and I do not know which path to choose. Will you show me the way?" The Pythia did not speak at once. Her face remained calm, her breath steady as the fumes of laurel and earth swirled in the air. Callista felt a flicker of doubt, perhaps. Her question was too small, too humble for the oracle's ancient wisdom. But then the Pythia's lips parted, and her voice, soft as the sigh of the wind through olive branches, filled the chamber. "Child of earth and sky," she murmured each word, a thread of gold woven into the silence. "The path you seek is not written in stone. Like the river, it winds and bends, shaped by the choices you make and the strength of your heart." Callista's breath caught in her throat. She listened intently, every word sinking into her, like rain into parched soil. "You stand at a crossroad." The oracle continued, her voice both distant and near. "Two roads lie before you, one lit by the glow of certainty, where each step is laid in order. Safe but small. The other winds into the mist, its end unseen, where each choice is a forge of your spirit. Callista's hands tightened on her knees. She had always felt that there was more to her life than the safe walls of home, but fear had kept her still. Now, hearing the oracle's words, she felt that fear shiver and break like ice in the sun. Your fate is yours to weave. The Pythia whispered, her eyes half open, shimmering with a light that was not of this world. The gods may watch, but they do not choose for you. In the quiet of your soul, you will find your answer. The words hung in the air, as soft as a prayer and as sharp as a blade. Callista's heart thundered in her chest. But in that moment, she understood the oracle's gift was not the certainty of a path, but the courage to step into the unknown. The Pythia fell silent, her head bowing once more as the sacred fumes drifted higher. The priestess at Callista's side laid a gentle hand on her shoulder, guiding her back from the Aditon's shadows. Callista rose, her limbs trembling, her breath unsteady. She felt no sudden flash of revelation, no clear vision of the future. Instead, there was a quiet fire within her, a knowing that her path was her own to make, and that the first step was hers alone. She stepped back into the outer chamber, her eyes adjusting to the softer light. Around her, the temple remained serene, its marble walls ageless and calm. She saw the other seekers waiting, each carrying their own questions, their own fears. And in that shared silence, she felt a kinship stronger than blood. The warrior she had seen earlier was gone, vanished into the sunlit world beyond the temple doors. She wondered what choice he would make, what road he would walk. And she knew that she too would have to choose, not in the safety of prophecy, but in the fierce quiet of her own heart. Callista stepped out from the hushed shadows of the temple into the bright light of afternoon. The sun poured over Delphi like a golden blessing, warming the white marble walls and casting deep blue shadows beneath the columns. But she felt changed, as if some veil had lifted within her mind, leaving her both light and uncertain. The words of the oracle still echoed in her ears. Your fate is yours to weave. They had not given her the answers she had hoped for, yet they had offered something even greater, the freedom to choose. She walked down the temple steps, her sandals soft against the worn stone. Pilgrims and merchants bustled around her, their voices low and reverent. Yet in her heart, she felt alone, not in sadness, but in a quiet wonder. The oracle's words had opened a doorway within her, and now she longed to step through it. Callista wandered away from the crowds, seeking the green hush of the laurel groves that surrounded Delphi. The trees shimmered silver in the light, their leaves whispering secrets to the mountain breeze. She walked deeper into the grove, the rustle of the leaves soft beneath her feet. The noise of the city faded behind her, replaced by the gentle sigh of the wind through ancient branches. The grove was older than Delphi itself, or so the story said. Here it was believed the god Apollo had first spoken to the Pythia, his voice carried on the breath of the earth. Callista laid her hand on the smooth bark of a laurel tree, feeling the pulse of life that ran beneath it. The tree seemed to hum with ancient knowing, its roots tangled deep in the bones of the mountain. She sank to her knees at the base of the tree, letting the cool earth cradle her. The dappled sunlight played across her face, and she closed her eyes, breathing in the sweet green scent of the laurel leaves. In the quiet, she thought of the journey that had brought her here, The dusty roads and cold river crossings, the nights she had spent staring up at the stars and wondering if the gods had forgotten her. She thought of the oracle's words and the way they had struck something deep within her, like a bell ringing in the darkness. The path you seek is not written in stone. She whispered the words to herself, tasting their truth. She realized now that she had always been waiting for someone to tell her what to do, to name her purpose, and give her a place in the world. But the oracle had given her something more precious, the knowledge that her destiny was not given, but made. A breeze stirred the branches above her, and the laurel leaves shivered their silver undersides, flashing in the sun. It was as if the grove itself breathed with her, sharing in the quiet wonder of that moment. She opened her eyes and looked around, seeing the grove with new clarity. Each tree was ancient, yet each leaf was new. The past and present lived together here, woven in a tapestry of green and gold. And in that eternal dance, she saw a reflection of her own life, the choices she would make, the paths she would forge, the stories she would weave into the world. A soft footstep startled her, and she turned to see the priestess from the temple standing at the edge of the grove. Her white robes seemed to glow in the soft light, and her eyes were as calm as the stillest pool. "You have found the quiet." The priestess said, her voice gentle. "The oracle's words are seeds, they must be planted in the silence of your own heart to grow." Callista rose slowly, brushing the earth from her hands. "I see that now," she said softly. "I thought the oracle would give me answers, but she has given me something far greater. She has shown me that the answers are mine to make." The priestess nodded, her eyes warm with understanding. "That is the greatest gift the oracle can offer. The gods may speak, but it is in the choices of mortals that destiny takes shape." For a moment they stood in silence, the grove around them alive with the whisper of leaves. Then the priestess reached out and placed a laurel leaf in Callista's hand. "Take this," she said. "Let it be a reminder that the voice of the gods is a guide, but your heart is the forge." Callista closed her fingers around the leaf, feeling its cool, waxy surface. She tucked it into the braid of her hair, a small talisman of the truth she had found. As she stepped back onto the path, the light of the afternoon seemed brighter, the sky wider and more welcoming. She knew now that the journey was not ended. It had only just begun. Twilight fell over Delphi like a soft blue veil, casting the marble columns in gentle shadow. Callista walked slowly back through the winding streets, the laurel leaf still tucked in her hair. Her heart felt both lighter and heavier, as if the oracle's words had unlocked something deep within her, a door she could never close again. The city had grown quieter in the fading light. Traders packed away their wares, their laughter turning to hushed conversation. Lamps flickered to life, small flames that glowed like stars in the gathering dusk. The scent of olive oil and sweet honey cakes drifted from the kitchens, mingling with the sharp, clean tang of mountain air. Callista paused beside a small shrine to Apollo, its polished stone reflecting the last rays of the sun. She knelt and touched the cold marble, offering a silent prayer of gratitude, not for certainty, but for the chance to choose. As she rose, she noticed a figure seated nearby on a worn stone bench, his silhouette outlined by the flickering lamplight. He was a man of middle years, dressed in a simple tunic, a bundle of scrolls at his side. His hair was touched with silver, and his eyes were bright with curiosity, the gaze of one who had spent a lifetime seeking the heart of every mystery. He looked up and smiled, his voice warm and soft. "You carry the air of one who has spoken with the Oracle," he said. "I see the weight of her riddles in your eyes." Callista offered a shy smile in return. "I have heard her words," she said, her voice hushed in the quiet of the evening. "But I am still learning how to understand them." The man nodded, tapping his scrolls with a thoughtful finger. "Ah, the Oracle speaks in riddles because truth is never a single thread. It is a tapestry woven from many voices past and present, mortal and divine." His tone was gentle, but beneath it lay a depth of knowing. She tilted her head, curiosity stirring within her. "Are you a priest?" she asked. He laughed softly, the sound like the gentle lapping of water against stone. "No, child. I am but a poet, a weaver of words, much like the Oracle herself. My name is Myron, and I have spent my years gathering the whispers of Delphi, binding them into verses that echo long after the speaker is gone." Callista's eyes widened. She had always believed that poets and prophets shared a kinship, both speaking truths that lay hidden in the soul. "What have you learned from the whispers of Delphi?" she asked. Myron's gaze drifted upward to the night sky where the first stars flickered to life. "That every question holds within it the seeds of many answers," he said softly. "And that even the gods cannot tell a mortal heart what it must choose. The Oracle gives us the shape of possibility, but it is the courage of the seeker that gives it life." Callista felt his words settle in her heart like a balm. She sat beside him, the night folding around them like a cloak. "Do you believe that the Oracle's words are meant to guide us?" she asked quietly, "or to test us?" Myron smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Both, I think. The gods love to test mortals to see what songs they will sing when the path is hidden in shadow. But they also offer guidance woven into the world, like the constellations that mark the sky. The Oracle's riddles are like those stars, small points of light that can show the way if we have the patience to read them." Callista looked up at the sky, the darkness deep and velvet above them. She thought of the Oracle's voice, soft as the sigh of laurel leaves, and the warrior's question sharp as a blade. She thought of her own heart, beating steady and strong, and the road that waited beyond the temple walls. In that quiet moment, she felt the truth of Myron's words, that destiny was not given, but chosen, and that every choice was a song that echoed in the darkness. The poet rose, gathering his scrolls. "Come," he said gently. "Let us walk together to the edge of the city. I will share with you the oldest story I know of how Delphi was born, from the breath of the earth and the music of the gods." Callista stood, her spirit bright with curiosity. As they walked through the lamplit streets, Myron's voice wove a tale of ancient earth and living stone, a story that began long before she was born, and that would live on long after she was gone. The moon rose over Delphi, painting the marble columns with silver light. Myron led Callista along a quiet path that wound through the edge of the city. The scent of laurel and olive, thick in the cool night air. In the hush of the evening, the flicker of distant torches seemed to echo the heartbeat of Delphi itself, a place older than memory, alive with the breath of the gods. Callista walked beside Myron, her steps slow and measured. She felt as though she had stepped out of her own life and into the current of something far greater, a river that had carried the hopes and fears of countless souls before her. As they reached a small terrace overlooking the valley below, Myron paused, his gaze distant. "This," he said softly, "is where I always come to tell the oldest story." I know the story of how Delphi was born from the breath of the earth and the music of the gods. He gestured for her to sit beside him, and she did the worn stone cool beneath her palms. The night stretched around them, the valley below, wrapped in shadow and moonlight. Myron's voice was low and even, each word woven with the hush of the wind. In the beginning, he began. There was Gaia, the Earth Mother, the cradle of all life. Her breath was the wind that stirred the seas, and her heartbeat was the pulse of every living thing. From her, the mountains rose, and the rivers sang their endless song. Callista closed her eyes, letting his words carry her beyond the boundaries of her own thoughts. Gaia bore many children. Myron continued, and one of them was Python, the great serpent who coiled in the depths of the earth. His scales gleamed like night, and his hiss was the voice of the mountain's secret heart. Callista pictured the serpent ancient and coiled in the roots of the world, its breath rising in the sacred vapors that still filled the oracle's chamber. For a time, Myron said, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. Python guarded the earth's mysteries, and the people feared and honored him. But when Apollo, the golden god of light and song, came to Delphi, he brought with him the music of the sun. His voice was a lyre's sweet cry, and in it was the promise of order and clarity. She imagined Apollo radiant and young, his lyre shimmering in the dawn light as he stood before the shadowed serpent. Apollo slew Python. Myron set his voice a soft lament. He claimed Delphi as his own, a place where the light of prophecy would shine through the mists of the earth. But the breath of Gaia remned the sacred vapors that rise from the earth, carrying the whispers of the past and the sighs of the future. Callista shivered, feeling the weight of the story settle around her. She thought of the oracle, her voice woven from those ancient vapors, and the way her words held both the light of Apollo and the shadows of Gaia's oldest secrets. In this place, Myron said gently, "The voices of earth and sky speak together. The oracle does not give the future, she reveals the song of the world, and each seeker must find their own harmony within it." Callista opened her eyes, the night bright with starlight. She felt the truth of his words in her bones, that the oracle was not a door to certainty, but a mirror that reflected the light and darkness within every soul. She turned to Myron, her voice quiet. "Have you ever asked the oracle your own question?" she asked. He smiled, his gaze distant. Once he said softly, "I asked her how to find my place in a world that is always changing. And she told me that my place was not a single point, but a path I must walk every day, shaped by the stories I tell and the kindness I offer." Callista felt a quiet wonder at that, a comfort that even those who wove words from the breath of the earth still carried questions in their hearts. As the night deepened, the two sat in silence, the valley below them stretching into the darkness. The air was cool and sweet, and the whisper of the laurel leaves was like a song without end. The moon had climbed high in the sky, its silver light bathing the valley in a pale glow. Callista parted from Myron with a gentle nod, her heart still echoing with the oldest story, the song of Gaia and Apollo, the dance of shadow and light. But as she walked back toward the quiet streets of Delphi, a shadow of doubt slipped through the wonder she carried. The oracle's words replayed in her mind. "The path is yours to weave. The gods may watch, but they do not choose for you. At first, they had filled her with a sense of power, the knowledge that her fate was hers alone. Yet in the hush of the night, she began to wonder, What if she wove the wrong path? What if the threads she chose unraveled, leaving her lost in the darkness? The streets of Delphi were hushed, the flicker of oil lamps casting warm pools of light in the doorways of quiet homes. Callista passed them with slow steps, the soft murmur of the laurel groves in the distance, like the whisper of a forgotten song. She felt the weight of the oracle's riddles settle on her shoulders, as heavy as the night sky. She paused by a small fountain, its waters silvered by moonlight. She knelt and cupped her hands, letting the cool water slip between her fingers. In its quiet ripples, she saw her reflection eyes wide with wonder, but also clouded by doubt. Who am I to shape my own fate? She thought. What if the path I choose leads only to emptiness? She remembered the warrior in the temple. His proud shoulders bowed beneath the weight of his question. She had seen the same fear in his eyes, though he had tried to hide it behind his armor. The oracle's words were like seeds planted in the heart, but they grew in the soil of doubt as much as hope. As she rose from the fountain, she heard a faint sound. The soft cry of a nightbird, its song threading through the quiet like a note of loneliness. She closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her, breathing deep the cool night air. The doubt did not vanish, but she felt it settle like a shadow that would always walk beside her, a part of the journey she could not leave behind. Callista continued on her steps, leading her to the edge of the laurel grove, where she had sat earlier. The silver leaves shimmered in the moonlight, and the breath of the earth rose in the night air. She felt the weight of the mountain beneath her feet, solid and eternal, older than any question she could ever ask. She knelt in the soft grass, her hands pressed to the cool earth. Great Apollo, she whispered, her voice as soft as the wind. I do not ask for certainty. I do not ask for the path to be clear. Only give me the strength to walk it, to bear the weight of my own choices, and to trust that my heart is enough. The laurel leaves rustled, as if the earth itself had heard her quiet prayer. And in that moment, something within her shifted, not the vanishing of her doubt, but the acceptance of it. She saw now that the oracle's words were not a map, but a mirror. They reflected back not just the light of destiny, but the shadows of fear and hope that lived side by side in every mortal heart. She rose slowly, her breath steady. The night was still and calm, the stars bright above her. She knew that the journey ahead would be filled with questions, with choices that would not always be easy. But she also knew that she was not alone, that the breath of the earth and the light of the stars walked with her, whispering songs of those who had come before. Dawn broke over Delphi with a hush of golden light. The marble columns of the temple bathed in the first glow of day. Callista walked the quiet streets, the scent of laurel and earth rising in the cool air. Her sandals whispered against the worn stone, each step steady and sure. She had spent the night beneath the silvered leaves of the laurel grove, the breath of the earth, a soft lullaby in the darkness. Now, as the sun rose, she felt the warmth of it seep into her bones, a promise of new beginnings. The oracle's words still echoed within her. The path is yours to weave, and though the whisper of doubt still stirred in her heart, it was a quiet note now woven into the fabric of her courage. She knew that the future was not a riddle to be solved, but a song to be sung. A song she must find within herself. As she climbed the steps to the temple one last time, the hush of dawn seemed to hold its breath. The priests moved like pale shadows among the columns tending to the altars, and the braziers that sent sweet smoke curling into the sky. The scent of burning laurel rose around her, familiar and comforting. At the threshold of the sanctuary, she paused, her hand resting on the cool marble. She thought of all those who had knelt here. Before her, warriors and poets, queens and shepherds, each carrying their questions like torches against the night. She was one among them now, her questions simple and profound. She stepped inside. The Adyton was quiet, the sacred vapors rising in soft spirals. The Pythia sat as she always did, serene and still, her laurel crown glinting faintly in the dim light. The hush of the chamber seemed to lean closer as Callista knelt, her breath steady. "Great Pythia," she said softly, her voice clear in the silence. "I have no more questions for the future. I only wish to know this, how to carry the weight of my own choices, how to walk forward when the path is mine alone to make." The oracle did not speak at once. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing deep and calm. For a moment, it seemed as if the earth itself held its breath, listening. Then, in a voice that was both soft and ancient, the Pythia spoke. "Child of the earth," she murmured, "the weight you carry is the measure of your spirit. To walk forward is to trust in the quiet strength within you, the flame that no shadow can ever fully quench." Callista bowed her head, her heart thrumming like the wings of a bird. The oracle's words were not a command nor a map. They were a reminder that in every choice she made, in every step she took, she wove the shape of her own destiny. The Pythia fell silent, the hush of the chamber closing around her once more. Callista rose slowly, her breath steady. She did not feel the certainty of a warrior or the calm of a priest, but she felt something deeper, something older. A quiet knowing that the road ahead was hers to shape, and that was enough. As she stepped out of the temple, the sun rose higher, the light bright and clear. The city of Delphi shimmered in the dawn, its marble walls and green groves alive with promise. Pilgrims moved along the paths, each carrying their own questions, their own dreams. Callista paused at the edge of the temple steps, the laurel leaf still tucked in her hair. She thought of Myron and his stories of the warrior whose shadow had crossed her path, of the quiet voices that had filled the night. Each had walked their own journey, shaped by the riddles and choices that lay within their hearts. She smiled softly, her hands steady at her sides. She did not know where the road would lead, whether to triumph or to heartbreak, to laughter or to tears. But she knew that she would walk it with open eyes and an open heart, and that the song of her own spirit would guide her when the night grew dark. With a final breath of the laurel-scented air, she turned away from the temple, her steps light and sure. The world beyond Delphi waited, a canvas of possibility, bright with the light of a new day. And in the quiet of her heart, she carried the oracle's final gift, the courage to begin.